Hello everybody, welcome to the Laurie Files. Today we're talking about oil paints. 5 misconceptions of what people that haven't used oil paints, maybe that's why they're put off with them, by them. So I'm going to run through some of these and I'm going to go through the equipment and the brands and whatnot that I've used. I've oil painted for probably about, without giving away my age, 30 years. I started using oil paints after using acrylic paints. Just wanted to experiment, and we went out and bought a heap of stuff, went to this beautiful art shop, went and bought a heap of stuff, and I started off doing landscapes. And then I moved on to doing seascapes, and now I do pet portraits mainly with my oils at the moment. But I just love them. I love the way they feel. I love the result because they're so pigmented. I love how versatile they are. And I think a lot of people are scared to have a go. So let me run through some of those points. The first one is the smell. Okay, so some people are like, oh, you've got to use chemicals, you've got to use mineral turpentine. No, I don't use any mineral turpentine. I don't use any thinners. All the paints are lead free that I use, and I will go through some brands that I use, and there is no smell. The smell is in the varnishes that I use, but you don't have to use those. If you're just starting off, you don't have to use those. You can use those sprays, and those sprays do smell, but you use those with charcoal, and you use those with pastels and pencil and anything else. Those fixatives do have a smell, but it's personal choice whether you want to do that or not with oil paint. If I'm selling a piece, I put the varnish or the spray, whichever I feel is applicable for that application. But I do it outside, and I leave it outside. When it dries, the smell is gone. You can't smell it. The smell does go away. It's the vapor from putting it on the actual application. It's quite potent. The actual paints and the vehicles that I use, or the thinning down products that I use, do not have a smell. Okay, so that's smell. The next one that we come across is the cleanup. Now, cleanup, a lot of people were using, again, thinners, mineral terps, on those abrasive. They're very abrasive on your brushes, and they don't really... they work with the paint as far as thinning down goes, but it's very old. That's the old style of doing it, the old way of doing it. I'll show you the thinners that I use, well, not thinners, but the medium that I use to make it flow better. A lot of the paints these days that you buy, if they're not old and they haven't gone hard, they are quite they're quite smooth anyway. They'll go on quite smooth. So it depends how you paint. I quite like to paint thin. I don't really pack it on too thick. I know with oil paints a lot of people do building up, and that can be quite time consuming. I tend to paint quite thin because I come from, painting in acrylic or whatnot, and then I've come to this, and I was painting the same way. So it's taken a long time for me to be able to settle in and be able to use the oil paints as they were intended. I still don't build up my paint. I'm too impatient to wait for the layers to dry, so I do tend to keep my layers quite thin. So my cleaning system consists of this. I'm not in any way sponsored by any of the product brands that you see. If anyone wants to come at me with a sponsor, I'll be more than happy, because But yes, this is the cleaner. It's by Chroma. It's called Incredible Brush Cleaner. Now, you can use this for, if you have brushes that, how they get the really dry, caked on paint after use. Now, I've got some brushes that are 20 years old plus. To be honest, they're just about getting to the stage now where I need to toss them out. Are they still usable? Absolutely. But this stuff, even if you're doing acrylic, or if you're using a lot of, even some glues, this is really good at getting some of the glues out. All you need to do, this is my cleaning system. This is it. Paper towel, you get off the paint that you've been using on your paper towel, get off any of the excess paint, wipe down the handle of the brush, throw it out in the bin, right? This one, you're going to, because I'll get to that in a minute, but this one, you put a bit in your hand, or you can put it into a little jar or a little container, and just dip your brushes in, give them a bit of a swirl, massage it through the bristles. Okay, this stuff's not going to hurt you. It gets it off your hands as well. So if you're messy like me, gets it off your hands and your face and your walls and your carpet. I know, because I've done it. Yeah, so get your water, give it a bit of a massage, be gentle with your brushes, and then you can rinse it off underwater, or you can just, with me, because I'm on tank water, I just use a jar and I just give it a rub out in the jar or the bowl or whatever. So run it under the tap, or rinse it out into a jar or container, and just pop them over to one side to dry, or you can just use the piece of paper towel. Using the piece of paper towel to dry them is a really good test to see if you've got all the colour out. If there's still pigment there, then you need to give it another go. Now, I have left brushes sitting on the bench. Yes, guilty as charged. I have done it a few times where I've just gone, oh boy, that ain't going to be good. Pick it up and it's rock hard on there. I soak it in this stuff. What I did was, because the bristles were sticking up, right, they were, I thought it was a goner. I've put it in the jar, left it there for a couple of days, soaking in this stuff neat in the bottom of a jar, and I just left it there. I kid you not, within about 3 or 4 days, I've come back, given it a bit of a rub. Now all that paint started to come off, and I actually, those brushes were usable again. So even if you use acrylic paint, or with gesso or anything like that, this stuff is fantastic. I swear by it. It's about, in Australia, you pay about $20 for a bottle. You can get a bigger bottle than this that's better value. And to be perfectly honest, I would not use anything else. This stuff is the bomb, and yeah, save my brushes over and over again. So it's a lot kinder than thinners, and it's a lot kinder to your body, because you can put it on you and it's not gonna, it says non-toxic on it. It doesn't even tell you what's in it. So it's magic, I believe. It is magic. But yeah, you just need to rinse your bottle. You need to rinse it out well, because it's soap. Okay, so that's that. So that's clean up. Now, what do we paint on? People say, canvases are so expensive. Well, yes, we do have, I buy them when they're on special, mostly. Unless I've got a client that needs a painting ASAP, then I pay full price. But these guys, this is only a little one. I mean, everybody knows that you can get these at the dollar store. Well, in America, you can get them at the dollar store. I think you can get them here at the Silly Solly store, Reject Shop, and you can actually get the good quality. Like, you can get Montmart and stuff like that. And you can also get them online. This one in particular, Aldi had them, and I bought a heap of them. I think there was 3 or 4 for $7. Over the course of time that I've been using these, I find that when you're starting off, this moves when you're painting on it. You can't be rough because you put a hole in it, but this moves as you're painting, and that can be a little bit tricky for some people, especially with oil paint. If you're trying to, if it's a little bit thick and you're working a bit thick, it can be a little bit tricky to work on. So that's option number 1. Option number 2 is this dude here. Now, oops, upside down. This one is in particular is Montmart. Now, these are everywhere, different brands, different things. They're called a canvas pad. It will say on it acrylic gesso primed, because even though you're using oil paint, you can acrylic gesso. I use acrylic gesso on everything because, 1, it's cheap, and 2, your options aren't limited to just oil. If you put oil gesso on top, you're only going to be able to use oil. Your acrylic paint ain't not going to stick. So these bad boys are a really good way to go. I just cut them out with a Stanley knife up the top, and then I just stick them onto a board, piece of MDF board, such as this bad boy here. I know this one's a bit small. This used to be my flooring in the craft room. We ripped it up because see how thin it was? No wonder I nearly fell through. So yes, these bad boys here, you can obviously get the right size because that's an A3. You can cut them down. That's the other reason why I like to buy the A3, because you can obviously get 2 A4s out of 1 A3 page. This bad boy here is just MDF. You can stick your canvas paint, or option 3, gesso. These got bad boys, gesso it, and then you can paint on it with your oil paints. I Oh, Cookie. Shh. I would sand it a little bit because you need a little bit of tooth for oils to grab on because they're so slippery, you know, because they're so smooth. But good option. Option 3 is really cheap. You can go down to your local hardware store, buy a heap of MDF at different thicknesses, and yeah, off you go. No problem there. And you can make them whatever size you want then. Okay, so that's 3 options. I'm sure there's more out there that I haven't thought of, but they're the 3 that I use the most. So that's what to paint on. Now let's talk about what to paint with. And I'll also do a bit of a comparison with as far as expense goes. So firstly, we're going to need some brushes. Okay, now I know a lot of people out there that do watercolor. You want thirsty brushes that, you know, suck up the thing. You don't really need that with oils. What you need more with oils is a brush that is going to not repel the oil. And what I mean by that is these cheaper brushes, these ones, they're good for some effects, like, you know, if you're doing bristles or you just need that, but the paint is repelled by that because it's a nylon-y material, so that the paint repels. So when you go to put it on, you're basically going to be wiping it off. They're not the best, and they're not very good at blending because the bristles are totally too thick. These guys here, the bristles on these are very, very fine. I'm not sure if you can see that. I'll see if you can. The bristles, this one's not clean. See that? It's got thing on it. Dear Laurie, you need to soak it. So the bristles are very fine, and they're very close together, and they're also very soft. Montmartre ones, you can get them off eBay, and they're very good. My Montmartre ones they did wear quite fast. They do wear quite fast, but this one here's a 20. This one's called, oh, this one's an Artland one. So this was one of the original ones, and this is made in Germany. And I find that products that are, I know with a lot of the oil painting products, when they're made in Germany, they're top notch. This would have been quite expensive. These ones, not so much, but they work. So you can go and get the Montmartre brand and have a go. And they obviously come in all the same sizes as what you'd use for anything else. The other thing you can paint with are paint or palette knives. Now, what do you use for a palette knife? Well, palette, you know, you could use one of those fancy dancy Bob Ross type boards, you know, the big boards, and he get out there with his little thing and he's, you know, sounds like he's going to lay bricks. But I had one of those for a very long time. It got to the point where I got so fed up with scraping off the paint, scrubbing it down with the cleaner, you know, it would just stick so hard, I threw it out. So after 20 years, I decided that this was not for me. And the amount of water, you know, scrubbing it down, then rinsing it off. It was a lot of water every time and a lot of work. So in the end, I decided, you know what works? You can use one of these, like a bit of board or a bit of, hang on, see it over here, a bit of Perspex. You could use this straight, the Perspex. You can see that I've obviously done that at some point and made a real mess of it. You can use them straight on there and then scrape it off when you're finished. Or if you're like me and tend to just walk off and leave it on the bench and forget, put some baking paper down on here and then just use some tape and stick your baking paper on the back. So your baking paper's on the front, and then that way you can just rip it off. I think it's probably a lot cheaper than buying those throwaway pallets, because you can just go to the kitchen and grab it and use it. Alfoil works just as well. I've seen Luna Smith, she's a Scottish painter. I've seen her use alfoil, and it was funny because I'm like, oh, I use alfoil too. So a lot of people do it, and I think it's just a lot easier to, when you're done, you can throw it out, and it's cheap. You don't have to clean up. Also, if you're painting and you have paint left over, you can put a bit of Glad wrap over it and save your palette. Just put it on the thing. Sometimes I put mine in the fridge, which helps to preserve it a little bit longer. But yeah, hubby don't really like me doing that. But yeah, you can put some Glad wrap over it to seal it off, and then you can just put it down. And to be honest, if it's a fair bit of paint there, it will be quite dry, okay, when you come, quite dry. It'll be quite wet when you come back and you'll be able to use it. So that's brushes and a palette. Right, we're off to a good start. My brushes are drunk, they just fell over. Okay, so next thing, what do we paint with? All right, so here's my white. Please don't laugh at how disgustingly dirty this is, because I do not work clean. This is a Winsor and Newton. So I've got a few here, and I'll just go through the ones that I like, and they go from expensive. Winsor and Newton is not a cheap brand when it comes to oil paints, but I like it. I bought the big white because I use a lot of white. Now, does it smell? The question is, does it smell? Does it smell bad? No. There is no... In whites, back in the day when all the Leonardo da Vinci and all that were doing it, they were all mad because of the lead. There is no lead content in the paints that they make these days. They're 100% safe. Do I recommend eating them? Absolutely not. Do I recommend putting them in your mouth or in your pet's mouth? No, I don't. But having said that, if you get it on your hands, or you do get it on your mouth, because I have been known to put the paintbrush in my mouth and actually get it in my mouth, and I didn't die. Winsor and Newton are made in England. They're a very good brand. They tend to, like, they're quite a stiff. I find that, especially because I buy the white because I like it, I find it's quite a thick consistency, but it's good, and they're very, very nicely pigmented. Top-notch brand. Do I think you need to rush out and buy it? Absolutely not. There's plenty of good ones on the market. Art Spectrum is an Australian made one. Oh, and I meant to say each one has a vehicle in it, and the vehicle is basically what makes it soft. Okay, what makes your pigment soft. Winsor and Newton use safflower oil in theirs, okay? And I think this is where the differences in textures come from. Australian brand, they have actually changed their packaging to that. You can see the difference. Both, and one says AP and one says AS. They are both Art Spectrum, both made in Australia. Both have linseed oil as their vehicle. And I find that they are, for a cheaper end of the paint, they are a very good quality paint. I've only just started using these are new to me, and I find that they are a very good quality paint. The pigment is beautiful, they mix fabulously, and they're affordable, which is nice. Oh, this is a little sample. This is a Sminky, German made, expensive. Pigment is fantastic. It's amazing, the pigment. And anybody that works with Sminky knows that they're top notch. So that's another high-end brand. Okay, so we've got two high-end brands, one middle of the road. Oh, there's another Winsor and Newton. So the vehicle in this one is linseed oil, so it's a little bit different to the other one. Maybe because of the colour. Oh, look. Maybe because of the colour. That's an AS. That's another. So I've got a few of those. Oh, here we go. This is Franchville. This is an Australian brand too. Now, I got this one a long time ago. It's a skin colour one, and it's actually was really hard for me to find a skin colour. But this is a fairly old one, and it's very squishy still. So very squishy. It's very squishy. It's very squishy. So that one's good, and I think Franchville are affordable. Like, when I say affordable, I'm saying, you know, relatively cheap. You don't have to take out a second mortgage to afford to buy them, because that's the thing, isn't it? You know, there's so many colours, so we all want every one. And then we got good old Montmartre. I think they're good for a starting paint. I do find that with Montmartre, their consistency tends to be a little bit runny. So if you know, like the buttery feeling, they're great. If you want a little bit stiffer, then it's probably not going to work if you are trying to build your work up. So, but it's a good starting paint. Okay, so then we have our vehicle. So everybody knows that with acrylics and watercolor, you use water to water them down. This bad boy here is refined linseed oil. It's also made by Art Spectrum. Now this bottle, I've had this bottle for quite a long time because you don't need to use much. Sometimes I don't use any, especially if I'm using the Montmartre, because they're quite, as I was saying, they're quite buttery. This bad boy is really helpful with my Lefranc ones. Now this particular brand, I don't think you can get Lefranc anymore. They stopped making them. Now these particular tubes of paint, I've got about 10 of them left, and these were my original paints from about 20-30 years ago, and I'm still using them. So that just goes to show you these were made in France. So yeah, these were top of the line, and it cost quite a bit of money to set up, but you know, you can tell it's been what it is. So yes, but you can't buy that brand anymore, hence why I didn't go into it. But if I'm using those, I use a fair bit of this because they're quite thick. They've dried out over the years, and they are quite a solid paint. So I tend to use a fair bit of this because I work flat, as I was saying before. This does not have a smell, or if it does, very slight smell. It just smells like, I don't know, I wouldn't be any worse than car oil, fresh car oil. It kind of smells a bit like that. These set you back about 30 bucks for a bottle, and you'll get a heap out of it. Now how I use it, we'll get into that in the next episode. So that's it for today, folks. Thank you very much for tuning in and listening to me go on about my oil paints. Everybody knows how much I love them. If you want to see more, subscribe. I'm going to be doing a paint along in the next video. So thank you very much. I'd love to hear your feedback and your comments below. If you paint with oils, let me know what products you use. And yeah, I'll see you later.